Okay, well, let's get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our virtual Q&A on the New Mexico Spay Neuter Assistance Fund. I'm Elizabeth Wolf, the Chief Program Services Officer with Animal Protection New Mexico. We are so thrilled to see so many familiar names of animal advocates and new names as well joining us today. There are nearly 60 people signed up for this webinar from all over the state. And just very quickly, I wanted to kind of share where everybody's from. We've got folks here from Alamogordo, Albuquerque, Artesia, from Bernalillo, Deming, Edgewood, Farmington, from Hagerman, Hobbs, Las Cruces, Lovington, McIntosh, Mountain Air, from Raton, Rio Rancho, Roswell, Ruidoso, San Miguel County, and from Santa Fe, Santa Rosa, Sierra County, Silver City, Taos County, Tucumcari, and Valencia County. And also there are folks here whose location we don't know. So welcome to you all. We're thrilled to have you here. You represent the robust and dedicated animal advocate community we have here in our beautiful state. With me today is my awesome colleague, Marissa Sleeter, APNM Program Director. Marissa will be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So with that, I'm very excited to introduce you to our wonderful speakers this afternoon. Starting us off is Jessica Johnson, Chief Government Affairs Officer with Animal Protection Voters, which is APNM's legislative arm. Jessica and the APV lobbying team, along with many of you animal advocates, fought tirelessly in 2020 and in prior years for the passage of a spay-neuter funding bill. Jessica previously served on the staff of the ASPCA in Washington, D.C., and she's been with APV for about 6 years. Jessica is taking a break from the New Mexico legislative session today to give us a background on the bill, the spay-neuter funding bill that created this funding mechanism, State Senate Bill 57. Following Jessica, Animal Protection Voters Board Vice President Yolanda Eisenstein will give us an update on a legal challenge to SB 57. Yolanda is a nationally recognized animal law attorney who practiced in Dallas for 10 years. Additionally, she's written and edited 3 books on animal and wildlife law. And in 2018, Yolanda received the Excellence in Animal Law Award from the American Bar Association. Also with us today is Stacie Voss. Stacie is the chair of the Animal Sheltering Committee under the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine, which plays an authoritative role in the implementation of this spay-neuter funding. Stacie serves as the Animal Welfare Director of Farmington Regional Animal Shelter. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Jessica. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. And hi, everyone. It is great to take a brief break away from the state legislative session right now to look back on some of the great successes of past legislative work. And I'm really excited that we'll have a chance on this webinar for everyone to discuss, how this will work on the ground and save lives and improve our communities. So I just wanted to provide a real quick kind of reminder of what this legislation did and why we're now turning to, preparing for a really robust funding source for spay and neuter as we move forward here in New Mexico. So for many of you, I probably don't have to really explain the companion animal overpopulation problem. I know many of you work on this issue day to day, but it's one that is tragic, and it is also one that costs our communities a lot of money to deal with on the front end and at the back end. Because this has been a problem for many years, there was a study conducted in 2012, requested by the New Mexico State Senate to look at the best, most effective most equitable, most feasible funding sources for New Mexico. And it determined that the best source that we should look to is charging a fee to pet food manufacturers who sell their products in New Mexico. And this is also a funding mechanism that, as you can see on your screen, had a lot of support across the state. Next slide. So specifically, how does it work? So the bill was passed in the 2020 legislative session, and it went into effect about the middle of the year, and the fee collection started January 1st of this year. And so it's the New Mexico Department of Agriculture that is collecting fees. There's a 3-year phase-in period. So right now they're collecting a $50 fee per each product of dog or cat food or treats registered to be sold in New Mexico. Next year, it'll be $75, and then the following year, it'll be $100 per product and ongoing. We're just talking about dog and cat food, your standard dog and cat food. So it doesn't include any livestock food, any other animals like, companion birds or hamsters or anything like that. Prescription diets are also exempted from the fee. Those products are exempt. If there are small manufacturers, there's a lot of local startups that you'll find across the country that are making sort of artisan dog food or cat food. If they're a small business making bringing in $3 million or less of revenue, their products would be excluded. And then, of course, just to clarify, this is not a tax or a fee that's charged at the retail level. This is just being levied at the manufacturer registration point. New Mexico became the 4th state to pass this type of law. Maine, Maryland, and West Virginia have passed similar laws before. Every state is different, but it was all the same concept of this being the source of spay-neuter funding. On the right side of your screen, you'll see a little chart that shows you what's happening with these fees. Well, the law sets it out. The New Mexico Department of Agriculture collects it, and they're able to keep 4% of it for fee registration enforcement. Then the funds would be transferred to the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine, and up to 5% could be used for enforcement of the Animal Sheltering Act, which is also very important. And then a good 91% would go directly to facilitating spay-neuter surgeries across New Mexico. Next slide. So we've kind of been in the process of the fee collection and the state getting ready to execute this program over the past few months. But there, was a lawsuit that was filed late last year. I believe it was December 31st of 2020 that the notice of the lawsuit was presented to the state. So the plaintiffs are the Pet Food Institute and or other organizations that also opposed this bill when it was being debated in the legislature. They have sued the governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham. So they have not sued animal protection voters. They haven't sued anyone else. They've only sued the governor. And the state has appointed a law firm that is going to defend the governor in this lawsuit. And this is something that is sort of, that's the course of how these lawsuits work. I will say a few things about the lawsuit right from the start. First, these types of lawsuits are generally common. So there's nothing to be particularly worried or scared about yet. We also know that there is nothing new in what this lawsuit is saying about the law that was created by Senate Bill 57. It's the same arguments we've heard. It's the same arguments that many of the legislators heard. The Department of Agriculture has been collecting the fees as the law requires. So they've been doing that, but we have recently learned that right now they're just planning on, those funds are planned to be held for some time until there's more clarity on the direction or the outcome of the lawsuit. And the lawsuit is in its very early stages. There's no indication that it will succeed or fail. We're just kind of waiting to see what happens. And in the meantime, this pet food manufacturer fee is not the only source of spay neuter funds that New Mexico has to work with. We still have the tax checkoff, and we still have our spay neuter license plate, and we still have direct donations to the Animal Care Facility Fund. So there are still funds to work with while we're waiting for this lawsuit to play itself out. But in the meantime, I do want to turn it over to Yolanda Eisenstein, who is very knowledgeable about these things, and she can talk just a little bit more about the details of the lawsuit. Thank you, Yolanda.
Thank you, Jessica. What I'd like to do is I'm going to elaborate a little bit on what Jessica has just said and try to give you a little bit of insider look at the lawsuit so you'll have a little bit of a better understanding of what and why this is happening. As far as the plaintiffs are concerned, it's fairly predictable. You usually have several plaintiffs. And why do they jump on the lawsuit? For several reasons. First of all, you have to consider the fact that they have stakeholders, they have members, they have people who are looking to them to look out for their interest. And so that's very predictable. And I don't think there's any reason to have any specific concerns. They didn't join the lawsuit strictly because they think that it's a valid lawsuit. There are lots of reasons behind that. They have sued Governor Lujan Grisham in her official capacity as governor. And as Jessica said, they have hired an outside law firm to handle the case. And we have been in contact with their lead attorney, and we are following the case very closely. Why did they sue? As Jessica said, there were issues that came up during the session. And obviously the plaintiffs feel that they have an argument and they are asking a court to rule on that argument. There are obviously a lot of reasons why they're suing. And as Jessica said, also, we are the fourth state to do this. And you have to consider the fact that they would like to, the plaintiffs would like to try to stop this before it spreads to other states. So it's totally understandable why this is happening. What is their argument? So the plaintiffs are asking for two things. They are asking for a declaratory judgment, and they are asking for injunctive relief. And so to put that in easy language to understand, they are asking the judge basically to rule on the law and whether or not it is valid. So they want the judge to declare that the law is unconstitutional and that it's invalid. That's the first thing they're asking for. That's the fee aspect of it. Secondly, they are asking the judge to consider that the fee is actually a tax, that it's not a fee. And that raises a whole other issue, other legal issues. So those are the two areas that the plaintiffs are asking the judge to make a ruling on. And if they win, if the judge says either that it is a tax or that it is a non-constitutional fee, then basically they want the court to shut down the law. So that's what they're looking for right now. And so that's where we are as far as what they are asking the court to do. So right now, in terms of the status, there's not a lot going on with the lawsuit right now. They're in a back and forth mode. They're doing motions. They're asking the court to rule on certain motions, and they're doing certain filings. So on February the 19th, the defense, Governor Lujan Grisham's attorneys, filed a motion to dismiss the case. So what they're asking the judge to do is to totally dismiss it. And they have a couple of arguments in that respect. Their first argument is they're arguing that the plaintiffs, the Pet Food Institute and the other plaintiffs, haven't really alleged any action that has been taken by the governor that would subject her to any sort of liability. They're basically saying they haven't made a plausible claim. And so if there's nothing that she's done wrong, then they're saying the lawsuit should be dismissed. So all she did was sign the bill into law. And so the argument is that she does not have any liability there, and the case should be dismissed. So that's their first argument. Their second argument is that the governor is immune from suit, meaning she cannot be sued. And the reason she is immune from suit, according to the defense attorneys, is that she was acting in a legislative capacity when she signed the bill. And legislators, and this is true at the state level as well as at the federal level, the Supreme Court has ruled that legislators are immune from suit when they're related to any of their legislative activities. So the argument goes, the governor signed the bill as a legislator because she was acting in a legislative capacity, and therefore she is immune from suit. So that was filed on February the 19th. Right now, the plaintiffs are working on an answer to that motion, and that will be filed with the court tomorrow. So tomorrow, we will be able to read what the plaintiff's answer to the defense attorneys is. And so that will come tomorrow. And then after that, we have to wait and see what the judge is going to do. And there are several things that she could do. She may want more information. She may want briefs. She may want a hearing. So it's simply a waiting game as far as what happens after that. We just have to follow the suit and see. Some of the questions that you might have about this is, how long is this going to go on? It's really difficult to tell. The courts have been backlogged simply because of the COVID pandemic over the past year. So things are moving slowly to begin with. Some lawsuits certainly go slowly. The suit was filed, as Jessica said, at the end of December, and it's mid-March, and nothing has really happened of any substance. So in terms of how long the suit's going to last, it's really not predictable at this point. We just have to see what happens. As far as speculation in terms of what could possibly happen, it's really too soon to tell. And this is the case with anyone. No one can predict or speculate at this point because the judge hasn't made any sort of ruling. There's no opinion to read. There's no guidelines or guidance that the judge is giving that we could sort of say, well, you know, the judge ruled XYZ, and so therefore she's probably going to do ABC. There's just nothing out there right now to tell us what she's thinking or how she may rule. And so without any sort of substantive rulings or opinions, we really can't make any sort of predictions. The second thing is, this is not an animal case. This is about a very specialized issue, which is taxes and fees. So any sort of ruling, any sort of expert is going to be in that area. So it's going to be very difficult to make assessments at this point until we hear the experts in terms of why it's a fee or why it's a tax. And as we saw during the session, this came up during the session. The legislators who passed the law knew this argument was out there, and we just have to trust that they knew what they were doing and that they understood the issues. So we just kind of have to wait and see what happens. You may be thinking, okay, what can we do? What can I do? And there's really not much that we can do. Just watch the lawsuit go forward. We have confidence in the governor's attorneys. We have confidence in the lawmakers that they knew what they were doing. And so we just follow it and see how things shake out as far as the suit is concerned. One of the questions or concerns that you may have right now is the fact that the Department of Agriculture is holding the funds. I don't think this is any indication that they think the lawsuit is valid or that anything is going to change at this point. My assessment of this is they're just being cautious. They have other people's money. And I think anytime you have someone else's money, you're going to err on the side of being conservative or cautious before you distribute that money. And so I think they're just being certainly cautious and taking a wait and see attitude, which is what we're all going to have to do at this point. And we will be following it closely. The attorneys for the governor know that APV and APNM are following the case and that we're available to offer any sort of expertise or help in that area. So I think we've done everything that we can do at this point, and we'll certainly keep you apprised of what's happening with the lawsuit as it goes forward. So just to sort of summarize, tomorrow we'll have a response from the plaintiffs regarding the motion to dismiss, and we'll see what they have to say at that point. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end of this program, or if you think of things later on, please feel free to email me, and I'm happy to share any of the information that I have and thoughts that I have. And with that, I will turn it over to Stacie.
All right, hello, thank you very much, Yolanda. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with just a few PowerPoint slides just to help keep everything organized. So I wanted to start with a little bit of background. The Animal Sheltering Committee used to be a board, and they were under various departments within the state. However, so in the past they were a board, and there was license plate and tax funds that have totaled about $70,000 to $90,000 per year that they had distributed. There was not a formal application process with that distribution. A lot of times the board would use the APNM shelter survey data to target areas of high intake or high euthanasia and be able to do that. And that's kind of how they decided where to distribute the money. And also, I'm sure they took requests as well, but there was no real formal process for that. The license plate fees are still being collected, as we know. So what we do know, like Yolanda kind of talked about, the lawsuit kind of gummed things up a little bit, but the New Mexico Department of Ag is collecting the Senate Bill 57 funds, but there are still funds being collected through those license plates and other tax write-off types funds. How it's going to work is that once the funds are released, at least the Senate Bill 57 funds, those funds will be distributed to the New Mexico Vet Board, and they will give us a final tally of how much funds are available, and those will be minus those administration fees that they already talked about. There will be an application period, which is open now, and I'll get to that a little bit more. And then the Shelter Committee will review those applications and make their recommendations. The final approval will be by the Veterinary Board, and then the funds will be distributed. The general timeline for this year, how we want to handle it is the application period is open now through April 30th. During May and June, the Shelter Committee will have a chance to review those applications and score and assess those applications. And then the plan is to make our recommendations formally to the Vet Board at their July meeting. The Vet Board meets quarterly or 4 times a year. So July is, they have a meeting in April, and their next meeting is in July. And then after that, the funds will be distributed. So the Shelter Committee's role in all of this is, the first thing we needed to decide is what type of process we wanted to have. And it became very clear very quickly that we did want an actual application process rather than just distributing funds as we saw fit. We thought that would be the best use of everybody's resources, and also the fact that hopefully we will be dealing with so much with that many funds that the application process would be the best way to target and direct those funds. So we designed that application process, and what we tried to do is be a little bit open to what will and won't be funded, but did put some guidelines on the application. And then we also used Maryland and West Virginia, our 2 states that have done similar type bills with funding mechanisms. And we looked at their applications and how they structured things to use just kind of as a guideline. The next thing that we're working on is how to score those applications and to make the recommendations to the New Mexico Vet Board. So we want to come up with a score sheet or an assessment form of how we're going to score those applications. And then also we are working on what exactly the reporting process will be for the funds. We do know that there is an annual report that will be due to the state. We're just working on exactly what type of reporting process and what that looks like. So that's been the Animal Shelter Committee or the Shelter Committee role throughout that time. So some application highlights. Really what we wanted to stress was that that these projects or proposals should be projects. There should be a goal in mind of how many animals are going to be targeted or targeted areas. And the result should be an increase in the number of spay and neuter procedures. We wanted to be cautious that certain entities would not use this funding as a reason to then pull other funding. We don't want this funding to replace funding that's already in place, but instead increase the ability to do more spay and neuter procedures and help more animals. So with this first year, I should kind of clarify what we did think was going to be available was about $500,000 with the spay and neuter or SB 57 funds. However, those funds are now held. What we do have is just over $200,000 that are available from those license plate fees and the tax checkoffs and that type of thing. So our proposal for the projects, for budget-wise, they have no minimum. You can ask for the least amount of money that you would like. And then we did put a maximum of $50,000 on. Originally, we thought that was going to be about 10% of the total, which we thought was going to be the $500,000. But we wanted to make sure that we can find that balance between funding as many projects as possible, because we know these first few years will be critical in being able to do that. The cost of the surgery should be all inclusive. It should include everything that you need for that surgery. There doesn't need to be a breakdown in that budget of every single line item. We did include funding for rabies vaccines. That is required by law, and a lot of times we know that sometimes these spay and neuter surgeries are the only time these animals are going to be seen by a vet. We excluded funding for vaccines and other vaccines and microchips. And the reason for this is if you read the bill, it is very specific to assisting with spay and neuter only, or not spay, it's spay and neuter. So the committee debated about this for a while. And while we know vaccines and microchips are extremely important, we felt in the spirit of the bill that these funds should specifically go to spay and neuter surgeries. Also, that means more procedures can be done if we're using the funds for just spay and neuter rather than these other things, which can add up, and the funds wouldn't be available for the actual procedures. So for the application, you should have a budget. It includes average costs with different methods. There's a voucher systems, there's in-house or surgeries that you do yourself, and then there's the use of mobile units as well. We all know those have different price points and different ways to do those. So the budget should include those average costs, and then obviously items outside of surgical costs, like things like equipment is definitely included and able to be asked for, especially, again, if it's surgical equipment that's needed in order to be able to increase the amount of surgeries done. And then again, there should be an area that organizations are targeting, and that could be as small as a neighborhood, and it can be as big as a county. I think the targeting area is just really for organizations to be able to focus on specific spots that might be trouble spots with justification of this is a high intake area, this is why we want to target this area. The bill, SB 57, really outlined for us the eligible organizations. They are listed in the application and in the frequently asked questions. They are also the ones that came up with the income requirements and then the spay and neuter assistance. So again, some more application highlights. We do ask for timelines. projects should be able to be completed in about 12 to 18 months. We're not 100% sure yet. There's still some administration discussion to go on between the vet board and the shelter committee, but we're thinking distributions will be on a yearly basis is generally the plan, but could change. There's been questions in the past about what animals can be spayed neutered with these funds. Definitely free roaming or feral animals can be targeted, and these funds can be used for that. We just ask that you pay attention to local ordinances so that you're not violating anything with that. And then we didn't actually put residency requirements on the organizations applying for funds, because we know we actually have some organizations in Colorado that come down and help that might be interested in applying for funds. And we also did not put residency requirements on practitioners. One of the other states, I believe, actually did, but we know there's definitely not an overabundance of vets in New Mexico. And so if there's people with mobile units are having vets come down, we definitely wanted to be able to include that. However, the animals and the people that are receiving the animals that are receiving the surgeries and the people that are receiving the assistance do need to be residents of New Mexico. We wanted to be able to control that. Matching funds are not necessary, but they're definitely helpful. And this would be a great place for organizations to either find outside funds or inside funding for things like those other core vaccines or microchips. And that way can kind of show how project funds can keep going further. So matching funds are totally allowed and are encouraged if that's possible. Again, the bill outlined income requirements, that it has to be 200% of the within the poverty guidelines for household size. So included in nifty little chart, and it's also in the frequently asked questions with the application. But it's one further step that organizations are going to have to take to be able to verify that income. So again, currently we know we have just over $200,000 that has been collected and has not been distributed. We're going to use that $200,000 as kind of a trial run, I guess you could say, for the application process, and so we can work out the administrative kinks and figure out how this all works. And then the open application period is now through April 30th, so there's plenty of time for people and organizations to apply. The general plan for the committee is we want to distribute the funds that are available and then have a list of projects to award once the funds are released. It's very possible that the lawsuit and the court case can be wrapped up, hopefully by the time we would make the recommendations. But if not, we do want to be prepared with having those projects already lined up so that we can fund as soon as those funds are released from the New Mexico Department of Agriculture. So kind of the technicalities. The applications must be submitted by midnight on Friday, April 30th to that following email address. This is Fran Sowers is the executive director of the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine, and that is her email address, and it needs to all be submitted to them. All application materials, attachments, the actual application, everything needs to be emailed to Fran at that email address. And then you can find the application at that website, which we can definitely include in the chat or provide. But if you just Google New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine, it's going to come up, and they've just done some revisions for the website, and it's pretty easy to find. And I would like to give a special thank you to APNM and Elizabeth and her crew for their help designing an actual application in the technological sense was way beyond the scope of the shelter committee, and APNM provided some technical support for providing a fillable PDF and the design of the application, which is great. The content was definitely the shelter committee, but we couldn't have done that without APNM's help. So I just really wanted to thank them and also for hosting this Q&A as well, so that we can get the information out. And then while I had the opportunity, the other big topic in the animal sheltering world in New Mexico is the minimum standards for animal shelters. The New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine will hold a rules hearing on Thursday, April 22nd. It is going to be via Zoom, and this rules hearing is extremely important. It's your chance to give feedback on those minimum standards before the vet board votes it into law, essentially. So a lot of feedback has already been submitted via email and that type of thing, which is amazing, but the rules hearing will happen on that Thursday. So I know how important of a topic that is to a lot of people here as well. So I just wanted to plug that while we were at it. We were actually able to submit the final draft of the minimum standards to the board actually it was October of 2019. Oh my goodness. But with COVID and everything else, they couldn't really figure out how to have a public rules hearing. And unfortunately it did get delayed quite a bit, but we're there at that point where we're going to have that rules hearing, and the vet board will vote on it the next day at their actual meeting. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I will answer some of the questions that have already been asked, and then we'll open it up for more. The question was, what about Chewy? And this for the pet fees, dog and cat food bought online. And yes, the registration and spay and neuter fees apply to pet food manufacturers who are selling their dog and cat products only online. So definitely will be included in there. Where is the lawsuit filed? State or federal, and who is the judge assigned? The case is currently in the U.S. District Court for the District of New Mexico. The case was recently assigned to Judge Judith Herrera. Did this happen in the other states with this fee? I'm assuming we're talking about the lawsuit. As far as we've been able to tell, none of the other states' similar laws were challenged by a lawsuit. That's interesting. Can you post a link to the application here in the chat, please? And yes, we will get that done. So some other questions. How does the lawsuit tie up the funds from being released in a timely manner? Hopefully I addressed that a little bit, but essentially New Mexico Department of Ag is withholding all of those funds. So we don't have access to those. So we will not be able to distribute those until that is cleared up completely and those funds are released. But like I said, my plan as committee chair is to have projects lined up and available to be funded as soon as those funds are released. If it goes on too long, we would probably redo the application period. But if that gets settled, you know, the summer, fall, we'd probably just go ahead with the applications you already have. What about building acquisition? So far, the committee has kind of discussed that, and that would be a major capital campaign that we wouldn't necessarily put these funds towards. I'm not saying absolutely not whatsoever, but in general, we're looking to fund actual procedures and not building acquisition with these funds. For what do you suggest as proof of basically essentially income? So in the frequently asked questions document that is attached to the application, we tried to answer as many of these questions as possible that we thought might come up. But so that's up to organizations to come up with ways to verify income. There are several different ways to do it. There's looking at other federal assistance programs, and if they're enrolled in that, like Medicare and Medicaid. There's Social Security award letters, there's filed tax returns. And then there's also, for example, Albuquerque uses an affidavit, basically an affidavit signed by the person saying what their income is. So there's a couple different ways to do that, and that's really up to the organization to figure out how they want to be able to do, how to verify income. But it is a requirement of the bill. And then there was another question asked ahead of time, if they need to keep that verification on record or just basically check off that they verified it. And the answer is, I do not know. That is an administrative question that I'm going to have to pose to the vet board and their executive director and lawyer to see how they want to handle that. So that's, unfortunately, again, this is an administrative process that we haven't been through before. So there's just some questions we don't know until they come up. So I'm going to pose that to the vet board at their next meeting to figure out if those are records that you would have to keep, or if you could just verify and move on. Okay, next question. So will the committee be able to consider verbal verification to demonstrate low income status. That's really not up to us. It is included in the bill. Says that the income has to be verified. So again, Albuquerque does a signed affidavit that they're basically putting that burden on the person, that if they're not truthful, it would be they would be penalized for that, for not being truthful with their low income. We understand that it's a problem. Our own shelter runs a low-cost, no-cost spay and neuter assistance program too, and I'm amazed at how many people do not have any proof of income. So it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. But if your organization creates an affidavit, runs it through legal and sees how that looks or what that looks like, that's a possibility. But again, that is written in the bill, that the members that are helped have to be within those poverty guidelines. Okay. When you state free roaming with those that runs a safe shelter. Okay. If someone claimed the animal, we would make sure that they qualify under the income program. However, if no one adopts the animal and we can rescue it, would that animal qualify even if it ended up being adopted out of the state? So no, this is for owned animals. It is not for shelters to spay and neuter their animals, if that answers the question. So yeah, shelter animals would not qualify for this program. It's strictly for owned animals. So you're helping individuals with that spay and neuter procedure. So if it happened to come in a stray and they reclaimed it and you wanted to talk to them about the program you had and getting them signed up, that would qualify. But shelter animals or unowned animals, besides the free roaming or feral, would not qualify to be funded through these programs. Are individuals' donations considered as matching funds? Yes, if I understand correctly, if it's a individual that's donating to a spay and neuter program or a spay and neuter project, yes, those would be considered matching funds. If you're charging a copay or something like that with the surgery, that would not be considered matching funds. But definitely individual donations. I know our current program is being subsidized by our foundation. So yes, if you had matching funds coming from an individual donor, that would qualify as matching funds. How do we, this is about the minimum standards. How do we get a copy of the proposed standards? I believe those are on the New Mexico Vet Board website as well. If not, let me know and I can get you a copy. Is there a way for various applicants to coordinate so not to compete in certain areas? That is a great question. If there are organizations that want to team up, certainly they can apply as one entity. So this doesn't have to be each individual organization applying. If you work together and want to apply for a certain project or define a certain project, you can certainly do that, coordinate together, and then make one application. So yes, that is entirely possible to have various applicants coordinate, so not to compete. That's actually a great idea for some. So that's the same thing. Can funds be used by a 501c3 to spay and neuter animals currently in the shelter so they can transfer to no-kill shelters out of state? And that is a no. These funds are for, like I said, owned animals and not shelter animals. The question again, will we have to keep proof of income verification? Like I said, I'm going to have to clarify that with the vet board and their executive director and legal team. That I just unfortunately don't know that answer. So that will definitely be something that I bring up with them to clarify. Are there any vans in the state that are available for rural areas of the state, specifically Southwest New Mexico? Honestly, I don't know. I know that there are possibly some organizations that work on Pueblos and also the Navajo Nation reservation, but I don't know exactly how far they go or where they go. So unfortunately, I just don't know the answer to that question as far as what mobile units are available to travel throughout the state. Oh, the question, so a follow-up to the groups, but how would you know whose other groups are to coordinate with? That's really up to you guys. Network and find out, I guess, about who is around and who is doing spay and neuter that you can partner with. I know we don't have, it varies from place to place. There's some places that have lots of different organizations, and there's other places that don't. So network and see who's out there. I believe APNM also has a list of spay and neuter providers or projects. APNM has a list of programs that are already in the state. So you can definitely start there to check out to see who is possibly in your area that you could partner with. There is another question that was sent ahead of time, and they were an organization that helped collect puppies and transferred them to Colorado. And what they wanted to do was, how do they help in those areas where they're continuing to collect puppies from? They're trying to help solve the problem. To be honest, that's beyond the scope of this. Basically, the shelter committee and the spay and neuter bill is to provide the funding for it. My suggestion as a professional is to start looking at spay and neuter providers in the areas and see if they're willing to do a voucher system. That's probably the best way to do if you're looking in a bigger area or working in several different areas, to see if there's local private vets willing to do a voucher system, and then maybe apply for funds to start that voucher system, where if foster families or shelters are collecting puppies, they can then give out a voucher for that owner to go ahead and get their animals spayed, so they aren't collecting more and more litters of puppies. Can you post who is on the call? That I don't know. There's probably a participation, or there's a participants list, but that's would be up to APNM to provide. And I guess while I had a second, I really wanted to also thank and acknowledge the Animal Sheltering Committee. Until recently, we were a 4-woman team. Dr. V. Hill and Brittany Burkett from Albuquerque Care and Control, myself, and then Penny Wardlow from Taos were the ones that kind of worked on this. And then we've recently added Susan Simons was brought onto the committee just for our last meeting. So our next meeting is actually Thursday, March 25th. Those are open to the public. They are happening via Google Meets at this time, but it is open to the public, and you can definitely listen to us debate and talk. But this next meeting, we are going to talk a lot about that application assessment score sheet, how we're going to do that as best we can. Are there other questions that we tried? The committee really tried to be make the application something simple but complete, and we certainly didn't want it to be a barrier to anybody applying, and we're hoping with a 2-month open window that it gives people enough time to gather the information that they need. I think one of the most important parts of that is actually having a project defined or a proposal defined. It's a lot different than how funds have been distributed in the past. It was a lot of, here's some money, go do good things. And this is really, because of the amount of money we're talking about, needing to define specifics of how many surgeries you're planning on doing, what area you're planning on targeting, what providers are you going to use to provide those surgeries, what type of impact are you planning on having. If it is a organization that houses animals, how many animals do you house? What's your euthanasia rate? Like, we want to look at the big picture of what's out there. And even, I think we even ask for median income of the county that you're in. So we want to be fair to everybody, that we realize funding is different throughout the state, and some areas definitely suffer more than others. I think we're all in the same boat of needing the solution, and these funds are going to be life-saving for sure. But we know that there are just different places and different providers in the state in different areas. Okay, more questions. If granted money, is there a time limit on using the funds? Generally, yes. We would like projects to be 12 to 18 months in length. There's probably a chance that if you don't spend the funds within the year that you're given before the next application period, that you wouldn't necessarily get more funding if you hadn't spent the previous year's funds. So while we're not posting a hardcore time limit, we are saying that these are funds that you should be able to spend in a year or a year and a half time. Based on the previous selection criteria, what kinds of shelters do you expect will be prioritized for funding, municipal, underserved, smaller orgs, etc.? I honestly can't answer that question. It just depends on what applications come in. The committee has been cognizant of, we realize that if you're doing in-house surgeries, it's often cheaper, and you can get more done rather than using a voucher system. So what we really want to do is, instead of comparing organizations, we want to compare methods. So we don't want to say, well, these people can get more surgeries done because they're doing it in-house versus these people are using vouchers. We want to compare vouchers to vouchers, in-house to in-house, and mobiles to mobiles. So we've been cognizant of that idea. And I don't know exactly how we're going to, piece those details together in our assessment forms, but we're going to try to do that. So it kind of just depends on what comes in, but we want to consider everything and be as transparent and fair as we can be. So we don't really want to pit organizations against each other. What we really want to do is look at impact, projects, kind of criteria, like plans, budget, everything is going to be taken into consideration. So that it's a very vague answer, but it's all I can give you right now, considering that we haven't really seen what type of applications are going to come in or how many people will ask for funds. How do I send proof of nonprofit? Again, everything should be sent to that email address, and I can put it back up here in a moment. But that director at in New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine.org. So everything needs to be sent to that email address. We prefer everything digital, if at all possible, and everything for the application proof of nonprofit, etc., all needs to be sent to that email address. So a lot of people are asking about spay and neuter bans for other parts of the state, and I think APNM is going to try and provide some information on that. Do you have to be a nonprofit? No, unless you're an organization that's not a shelter. So the bill specifically states, develop criteria for individuals, nonprofit organizations, animal shelters, and euthanasia agencies. So if you're, a rescue that's not nonprofit, you probably would not be eligible at this point. The bill is specific about who can receive funds.
Hi, Stacie. There was just one question asking for the Zoom address for the shelter standards meeting. So if people are interested in that, I did put it in the chat. It's basically, you can access it through the New Mexico Vet Board, nmbvm.org. And it's pretty obvious right there on the homepage.
I just got a request. Please repeat the explanation regarding nonprofits. So, and I'm reading directly from the bill. Develop criteria for individuals, nonprofit organizations, animal shelters, and euthanasia agencies to receive assistance for dog and cat spay and neutering. So those are the people that are allowed to apply. Nonprofit organizations, animal shelters, and euthanasia agencies. So like I said, I know there's some rescues out there that aren't 501c3s, they would not be eligible to receive funds through this assistance fund. If you're a municipality, yes. If you are a animal shelter, for sure, you can apply for funds. And most animal shelters, I think, by now should be licensed within the state with the New Mexico Vet Board. So we'll probably double check those animal shelter licenses. But yes, if you're a municipal or a euthanasia agency, you're more than welcome to apply for funds. And I know the minimum standards is a hot topic. I'm kind of excited to finally move forward with the public hearing. I do want to stress that they are minimum standards. A lot of the feedback I have seen already is gold standard and not minimum standard. And also to understand the definition of an animal shelter according to the state could be anything from 6 dog kennels to at the back of a police station to wonderful facilities like Santa Fe. So there is a broad range of what we consider an animal shelter in this state, and we had to find standards that would fit them all. That was one of the committee's biggest challenges as we moved through that, is thinking about those dog kennels attached to the back of a police station, which is actually considered an animal shelter, to, like I said, the beautiful facilities like in Santa Fe, and even we're pretty lucky up here in Farmington as well. So I'm looking forward to those public hearings, and that'll be great. And I'm glad there's interest in that. So please check out the New Mexico Board of Veterinary Medicine website. It has all that information. Anything related to the shelter committee will now be on that website. And Fran's pretty good about getting it updated and putting the new stuff on there. So if there's nothing else, Elizabeth, I'll turn it back. Oh, wait. One more question, sorry. Do animals being redeemed by the owner qualify for this grant? I would say yes. If they're an owned animal and they are part of your program that you're at, our project that you're asking for funding, I would say yes, they qualify. All right, Elizabeth, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Stacie, and thank you to everybody. Let me bring back our nice gallery view if I can. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Thank you so much to our speakers, to Stacie, Yolanda, and Jessica, and thank you all, the participants, for your great questions, and most of all, for your commitment to improving animal welfare in our beautiful state. Here's some contact info for me and Stacie, and if you refer to the earlier slides, Jessica and Yolanda's contact info is there as well, or you can reach out to me and I'll send it to you. We are recording this webinar, so we'll send out the link through an email probably tomorrow or Saturday or Monday, and we'll also post it to APNM's YouTube channel. So if you have further questions, please reach out to any of the presenters. And thank you again for taking time out of your busy day and for caring about animals. So have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.